For your ears only for the week of January 26th in the State of the Union address, I'm David Alpern.
I'm Eddie Robinson with this quote from the news. So what looks like a victory against having to do a symbolic act may really be a defeat in having to do the nearly identical symbolic act. That was University of California Irvine law professor Rick Hasson after a temporary Supreme Court injunction that permits religious nonprofits to avoid mandated contraceptive coverage for employees under Obamacare pending a lower court ruling if they notify the Secretary of Health and Human Services of their objection, though not with the same form they could file for exemption under the new law. Now this.
Our task as organizers is to provide security for the participants and guests of the Sochi Olympic Games, and we are going to do everything for it.
If you hold the Olympics, you will receive a present from us. For you and all those tourists who will come over. It will be for all the Muslim blood that is shed every day around the world, be it in Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria, all around the world. This will be our revenge.
The practiced confidence, not to say arrogance, of Russian President Vladimir Putin, even through a translator, about the upcoming Sochi Olympics contrasts sharply with the threats of blood vengeance in a video released last week by terrorists linked to last month's attacks on not far distant Volgograd that killed 34 people and injured more than 100. Indeed, for all the anti-terror technology, 30,000 military and 40,000 police in and around Olympic sites, the government was reduced to old-fashioned wanted posters for one of four so-called black widows of slain extremists thought to be targeting the area, including one suspected of already slipping behind Putin's touted Ring of Steel.
So begins what may go down as the Security Olympics of 2014, where U.S. athletes were warned last week their love 'em or hate 'em Ralph Lauren team uniforms should not be worn outside the Olympic venues. If no violence occurs, of course, it may simply go down as the Corruption Olympics, as so much of its record $50 billion price tag has reportedly gone to graft, corruption, and pals of Putin. Or the Gay Defiance Olympics, given promised protests against Russian law banning homosexual displays. To preview those and other aspects of the Winter Games, we're joined by one of the Boston Globe team assigned to cover them, investigative sports reporter Shira Springer. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
There were major security fears and preparations for the London Olympics, which you covered for the Globe. How does the situation in Sochi compare, in fact, and in your fears?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that, as you mentioned, there were those attacks in Volgograd, and with these Olympics, there have been specific, credible threats against the Games. In London, there was sort of a perception that this would be a terrorist target, but here you have the videos with terrorists actually proclaiming, we want to hit the Olympics, prepare for a present, prepare for a surprise. And also, you are hearing, as much as we did hear about security measures being taken in London, you are hearing much more about them in advance to Sochi. And as you mentioned, that Ring of Steel, which will encompass 1,500 square miles from the coastal setup for the Olympic venues all the way up to the mountain venues.
Talk about the Putin charm and financial promise that led to selection of Sochi, so close to Dagestan, a hotbed of regional Islamist terrorism.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. A lot of people are asking now, how did this happen? How did Sochi get awarded the 2014 Winter Olympics? Well, they forget that in 2007 in Guatemala City, Putin charmed the IOC, and he promised to spend $12 billion. At the time, it's since gone up to $51 billion. But he charmed them. He spoke French to some IOC members. He promised big money. He had this great plan. He was going to turn this quaint little resort city on the Black Sea into this major sports showcase. And the IOC fell in love, I believe, with the fact that there was going to be a major investment in sport. And I think the IOC also liked the fact that they would be bringing the Olympic spirit to perhaps a place that hadn't seen it in a while, certainly not since the 1980 Summer Olympics. So there was that appeal as well. And, you can't always have the Olympics in such established cities as London or Los Angeles. You need to spread the wealth, so to speak.
The Obama administration has offered intelligence aid to the Russians with military transport on standby to evacuate Americans if necessary, but the Globe has reported no broader intelligence sharing between the two countries, even after a U.S. failure to fully exploit Russian tips about the brothers behind the Boston Marathon bombing. What can you tell us?
I think it's safe to say at this point that there have been high-level talks between Russian officials and U.S. officials about security measures, particularly what the protocol will be in event of an attack and the need to rescue Americans or evacuate Americans. However, from all the reports that I've seen and all the official comments that I've seen, it is a bit too late to employ any major U.S. assistance, particularly in the technological realm. What's done is done.
Even before arrival, you covered many of this year's Olympians right in the Boston area. Talk about the program in which local families brought athletes visiting to train for the Games.
Well, there's been an interesting program here. The U.S. women's hockey team has been training in an area of suburban Boston. It's been training at a rink in Bedford, Massachusetts, which is about 15, 20 miles outside of the city in the western suburbs. And many of the athletes there, about nearly a half of the members of the Olympic team, chose to live with host families so they wouldn't incur tremendous lodging expenses, and they have their room and board covered by these host families. And they also get a family atmosphere when training, a bit of a distraction, so to speak, from the grind of their training regimen, which is really an all-day 9-to-5 job for them. So there's that unique program where these host families have invited these athletes in, and both the host families and the athletes have gotten something out of it. A lot of the host families have children who are youth hockey players who someday aspire to be Olympians, so they get to live with their role models. And it's a very unique thing to have happen. Obviously, you know, on the flip side, the men's hockey team is all NHL players with $1 million contracts. So it's a nice other side of the coin perspective on what some Olympic athletes go through to participate in the Olympic Games, particularly when they don't have large funding and they don't have the option of large sponsorship contracts or professional contracts.
How has that connection affected the debate over a Boston bid for the 2024 Olympics, and what's your view?
It's interesting. The women's hockey team has been something of the best-kept secret in Boston. Not many people know that they are living and training in the Boston area, though those who do know are very excited and very caught up in the Olympic spirit at this point and eagerly awaiting the Sochi Games. I don't think it's had much of an impact on the bid for the 2024 Games because those will be the Summer Olympics. My personal perspective is, as much as I love the Olympics and the Olympic movement and all it stands for, Boston is just not the right size city. It just does not have the resources, and the resources that it does have are inadequate, as is.
Investigative sports reporter Shira Springer is on the Boston Globe team assigned to cover the Sochi Olympics.
Quote from the news, "I'm still finding myself, and then I have the media attacking me every day. It's no different than bullying that happens in school." That was 19-year-old teen idol Justin Bieber in a broadcast interview before his arrest last week on charges of driving under the influence with an expired license and resisting arrest after drag racing on a residential Miami Beach street.
Next, Syria, Iran, and surveillance back home. For your ears only.